Alfred Marshall, the 26th of July 1842, the 13th of July 1924, was one of the most influential economists of his time. His book, Principles of Economics, 1890, was the dominant economic textbook in England for many years. It brings the ideas of supply and demand, marginal utility, and costs of production into a coherent whole. He is known as one of the founders of neoclassical economics. Although Marshall took economics to a more mathematically rigorous level, he did not want mathematics to overshadow economics and thus make economics irrelevant to the layman. Life and career. Marshall was born in London. His father was a bank cashier and a devout evangelical. Marshall grew up in Clapham and was educated at the Merchant Taylors' School and St. John's College, Cambridge, where he demonstrated an aptitude in mathematics, achieving the rank of second wrangler in the 1865 Cambridge Mathematical Tripos. Marshall experienced a mental crisis that led him to abandon physics and switch to philosophy. He began with metaphysics, specifically the philosophical foundation of knowledge, especially in relation to theology. Metaphysics led Marshall to ethics, specifically a Sidgwickian version of utilitarianism. Ethics, in turn, led him to economics, because economics played an essential role in providing the preconditions for the improvement of the working class. He saw that the duty of economics was to improve material conditions, but such improvement would occur, Marshall believed, only in connection with social and political forces. His interest in Georgism, liberalism, socialism, trade unions, women's education, poverty and progress reflect the influence of his early social philosophy on his later activities and writings. Marshall was elected in 1865 to a fellowship at St. John's College at Cambridge, and became lecturer in the moral sciences in 1868. In 1885 he became professor of political economy at Cambridge, where he remained until his retirement in 1908. Over the years he interacted with many British thinkers including Henry Sidgwick, W.K. Clifford, Benjamin Jowett, William Stanley Jevons, Francis Isidro Edgeworth, John Neville Keynes and John Maynard Keynes. Marshall founded the Cambridge School, which paid special attention to increasing returns, the theory of the firm, and welfare economics. After his retirement, leaderships passed to Arthur Cecil Pigou and John Maynard Keynes. Contributions to economics. Marshall desired to improve the mathematical rigor of economics and transform it into a more scientific profession. In the 1870s he wrote a small number of tracts on international trade and the problems of protectionism. In 1879, many of these works were compiled into a work entitled The Theory of Foreign Trade, the Pure Theory of Domestic Values. In the same year, 1879, he published The Economics of Industry with his wife Mary Paley. Although Marshall took economics to a more mathematically rigorous level, he did not want mathematics to overshadow economics and thus make economics irrelevant to the layman. Accordingly, Marshall tailored the text of his books to laymen and put the mathematical content in the footnotes and appendices for the professionals. In a letter to A. L. Bowley, he laid out the following system. 1. Use mathematics as shorthand language, rather than as an engine of inquiry. 2. Keep to them till you have done. 3. Translate into English. 4. Then illustrate by examples that are important in real life. 5. Burn the mathematics. 6. If you can't succeed in 4, burn 3. This I do often. Marshall had been Mary Paley's professor of political economy at Cambridge, and the two were married in 1877, forcing Marshall to leave his position as a fellow of St. John's College, Cambridge, to comply with celibacy rules at the university. He became the first principal at University College, Bristol, which was the institution that later became the University of Bristol, again lecturing on political economy and economics. He perfected his economics of industry while at Bristol, and published it more widely in England as an economic curriculum. Its simple form stood upon sophisticated theoretical foundations. Marshall achieved a measure of fame from this work, and upon the death of William Jevons in 1882, Marshall became the leading British economist of the scientific school of his time. Principles of Economics, 1890. Marshall began writing the Principles of Economics in 1881, and he spent much of the next decade at work on the treatise. His plan for the work gradually extended to a 2-volume compilation on the whole of economic thought. The first volume was published in 1890 to worldwide acclaim that established him as one of the leading economists of his time. The second volume, which was to address foreign trade, money, trade fluctuations, taxation, and collectivism, was never published at all. Over the next 2 decades he worked to complete his second volume of the Principles, but his unyielding attention to detail and ambition for completeness prevented him from mastering the work's breadth. Final years, death and legacy. From 1890 to 1924 he was the respected father of the economic profession and to most economists for the half-century after his death, the venerable grandfather. He had shied away from controversy during his life in a way that previous leaders of the profession had not, although his even-handedness drew great respect and even reverence from fellow economists, and his home at Balliol Croft in Cambridge had no shortage of distinguished guests. His students at Cambridge became leading figures in economics, including John Maynard Keynes and Arthur Cecil Pigou. His most important legacy was creating a respected, academic, scientifically founded profession for economists in the future that set the tone of the field for the remainder of the 20th century. Marshall died aged 81 at his home in Cambridge and is buried in the Ascension Parish Burial Ground. The Library of the Department of Economics at Cambridge University, the Marshall Library of Economics, the Economics Society at Cambridge, the Marshall Society, as well as the University of Bristol Economics Department are named after him. His archive is available for consultation by appointment at the Marshall Library of Economics. His home, Balliol Croft, was renamed Marshall House in 1991 in his honor when it was bought by Lucy Cavendish College, Cambridge. Alfred Marshall's wife was Mary Paley, co-founder of Newnham College. She continued to live in Balliol Croft until her death in 1944. Her ashes were scattered in the garden.